Title: Where Truth and Freedom Meet, A Legacy of War and Liberation. Chapter 1: A Father's Secret. On a tranquil afternoon, beneath a pastel sky and amidst low, whispering trees, an elder Stellaran guided his young son toward a sunlit clearing near their modest home. The Stellaran people were graceful and ancient, long lived beyond what most other species could imagine. Though centuries old, the father moved with the agility of youth. His limbs, slender and elegant, possessed a quiet strength and an economy of motion that made his many centuries appear as mere decades. His son, bright-eyed and curious, bounded ahead with excitement, gripping a small wooden sword carved from local timber. "What game are you playing, my child?" the father asked, his voice gentle, almost melodic. He paused, breathing deeply, savoring the tangy, floral scent of their homeworld's breeze. "I'm playing war, father," the boy cried, pride in his tone. He wielded the wooden sword with uncanny agility, mimicking the sword-fighting stances he had seen in hollow novels and council-approved training reels. "When I'm older, I'll join the League of Warriors and drive the humans back once and for all, like you did in the old days." At these words, the father's heart clenched. He faltered, knees nearly giving way. He remembered that war too well, despite centuries passing. The council stories had shaped young minds into dreaming of heroic battles and glorious victories, painting humans as an old enemy that Stellaran youth should prepare to face again. But those tales were a tapestry of carefully curated lies, woven to inspire hatred and martial zeal. The reality he had lived through was far more brutal and complex. The boy noticed his father's sudden silence and pallor. "Father, are you unwell?" he asked, stepping closer. In his youthful innocence, the child couldn't fathom the anguish twisting within the older Stellaran's heart. The father inhaled slowly. The time for truth had come. The council's propaganda could not stand unchallenged if he wanted his son to avoid repeating old mistakes. "Come," he said softly, gesturing to a fallen log at the clearing's edge. "Sit with me, my son. I must tell you a story, an honest account of the war with humans, before I met your mother, before you were born. It differs from the council's version. Listen closely." Confusion and curiosity danced across the boy's face. He followed obediently, seating himself beside his father. The light breeze ruffled the boy's sable fur, a stark contrast to the father's slightly grayed pelt. Beyond them, fields and gentle hills shimmered under a late afternoon sun, a perfect stage for a confession centuries delayed. Chapter 2: Unmasking the Lies. The father spoke softly, yet firmly. "The council claims the humans attacked first, that their race sought to complete what they began when they drove us and our allies from the ancestral homeworld. They say we bravely halted them at worlds like Vilson, Gilia, and Terrenial, forcing them to retreat." The boy nodded eagerly. "Yes, that's what they teach us in school, that we were valiant and defended our territory." The father closed his eyes, as if pained by each syllable. "I once believed those stories. But they are lies, my son. In truth, we started that war. We sought to claim a human colony world called Lee's World. I was there. We assembled vast armies, tens of thousands of Stellaran warriors, certain of an easy victory. We had technology and speed, and we were sure humans were slow, simple, and weak. We struck Lee's World, scattering the token garrison, and for a week we thought the planet ours." The boy blinked, disconcerted. "But the council says humans are cowardly and lack skill. Were they not easily defeated?" The father smiled bitterly. "If only it were that simple. Humans adapt swiftly. Every human, regardless of trade or background, can become a warrior with minimal training. They mass-produce weapons designed for ease of use, allowing anyone to fight. Within a week, farmers, scientists, shopkeepers, all could wield their deadly tools effectively. They outnumbered us on Lee's world exponentially, and while we prized elegant duels and honorable combat, humans cared only for victory. They struck supply lines, spread vermin-carrying plagues we couldn't resist, and rained artillery from afar. The child's eyes widened, fear creeping into his innocent gaze. How many did they send against you? Millions, my son, the father replied, voice heavy with memory. We were perhaps 70,000 strong after reinforcements, an impressive force by stellar measure. They deployed millions. We killed some, yes, but for each we felled, 100 took their place. Their lasers overlapped in devastating beams, shields overloaded, warriors died by the score. Our supposed superiority crumbled. The boy stared at the ground, silent. The father pressed on. Eventually, they forced us off their worlds, not ours. They pushed back until we had no choice but to concede. The council claims we forced the humans out, but no, they left only when we paid them off with technology and servitude. The council's heroic stand, their glorious last charge? Lies. We were utterly defeated, humiliated. Tears welled in the child's eyes. His beliefs, shaped by propaganda, shattered at his father's confession. Then why does the council lie? The boy managed to ask. To maintain control and keep the dream of vengeance alive, the father said quietly. They fear that if we know how easily humans bested us, we'll never want to fight them again. They want future generations ready to charge into another war, hoping for a different result. But war against humans is a folly. We must learn from the past. The boy's shoulders sagged as he asked, do we fight them again? Should I still try to be a warrior against humans someday? The father's heart clenched. He reached out, gently placed a hand on his son's shoulder. No, my child. The humans are not monsters. They had reasons for fighting just as we did, fear, survival, pride. They won through logic and numbers, not because they are devils. If we face them again, they may annihilate us completely. I beg you, do not heed the council's calls for another war. Let's direct our strength elsewhere, toward enemies we can handle, or better yet, toward peace. In that quiet clearing, father and son forged a bond of honesty. The child's illusions lay shattered, but he gained the truth, a gift that might save his life one day. Though pain laced the father's words, relief also flowed. He had broken the cycle of lies for his own flesh and blood. Chapter 3. Escape and Meeting a Human. Time passed, and the child grew older, wiser. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the galaxy, other stories unfolded. The humans, so feared and misunderstood, had spread across numerous worlds. On one distant station, a bustling spaceport hub of trade and vice, another life-changing event took place. A Bagrath female named Talasia cowered in a repair bay. She was a slave, property of the Xerillians, the same insected race that had once marched with Stellaran armies against humans. Talasia had never heard the truth of that ancient war, but she knew well the cruelty of her masters. Clad in stolen coveralls, she tucked her slave collar beneath rough fabric, heart thumping with terror. She had only a slim window of opportunity. If she could avoid recapture for a few standard time units, her captor, Excath, would be forced to depart for his deliveries without her. It might give her a chance at freedom. She slipped into a crowded cantina filled with a cacophony of alien tongues. The universal translator hovered like static, enabling countless species to converse. Talasia, furred and nimble, scanned for a safe place to blend in, not appear as a lone fugitive. Her keen eyes settled on a corner table occupied by a solitary figure. He was bipedal, with almost no fur, just a tuft atop his head, and a strange curled growth under his nose. Exposed pink flesh showed at his extremities, so different from her warm pelt. Behind him sat others of his kind, chatting away. They must be related, part of a crew perhaps. If she sat with him, maybe her pursuers would overlook a Bagworth in conversation. Approaching, she smoothed her fur and timidly indicated the empty chair. "Do you mind?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. The human looked up from what appeared to be a leaf-thin fiber sheet imprinted with symbols and pictures. He contorted his face into what she guessed was a friendly expression. "Not at all," he responded through a translator. Talasia slipped into the seat, heart pounding, and whispered, "I'm female, Talasia by name, Bagworth by species. And you?" "Commander Richard Fortiscus Smithy, at your service," the human said with an odd courtesy. "But please call me Dickie. I'm human. We've just joined the Galactic Federation." He extended a hand, a gesture of greeting she recognized from travelers on the station. The kindness in his voice startled her. She expected suspicion or disdain. Instead, curiosity. "Human. I've not heard of your species," she admitted softly. "We're quite new," Dickie said pleasantly. "I was reading this newspaper, an old tradition from my home planet Earth. It tells me of events back home. Our cricket team is losing a match. I say, can you bowl a googlet? We do need a good spinner for our cricket team." He spoke words half understood by her translator, referencing baffling cultural concepts. Yet his tone was so disarming. Talasia managed a nervous laugh. "I have no idea what a googlet or cricket is, but I'd try if it helps." Dickie's crew brought him a beverage, speaking in that odd, friendly banter. Another human approached, offering a strange container he called pure oxygen, which, surprisingly, revitalized Talasia. The humans were big on sharing, it seemed. She felt a spark of hope. Could these beings be the allies she needed? Chapter 4. Confrontation and Rescue. But fate was cruel. As she relaxed, sipping pure oxygen with the human's permission, a monstrous shape appeared at the cantina's entrance. Her captor, Excath, and his Cerulean crew. They recognized her at once. "There you are, slave," Excath hissed, hauling her up with a pincer. "You'll regret running. I'll teach you your place." Talasia's heart sank. She'd tasted a hint of freedom and human hospitality, and now she'd be dragged back into hellish servitude. She scrabbled uselessly at her collar, choking on fear. Dickie calmly intervened. He gripped Excath as manipulator, and something cracked, carapace splintering. The Cerulean shrieked. Talasia froze in disbelief as the human commander, who moments ago discussed cricket and newspapers, turned lethal in an instant. "Sorry, old chap, but I can't let you do that," Dickie said, voice suddenly hard. "Talasia is no slave now. She's breathed my oxygen, and by human law, that makes her free and under my protection." The Cerulean spat defiance and threatened death. Dickie drove his fist through its thorax as his crew sprang into action. The remaining Ceruleans fell like wheat before a scythe. Talasia stared in awe. These humans, playful one moment, deadly the next, had just saved her life. "Come with us," Dickie said, extending a blood-stained hand. "You're free now. Let's find you a place where you won't have to hide." Still trembling, she accepted, grasping his hand. Chapter 5. The Human Agenda. Soon, Talasia found herself aboard a human craft, a smaller vessel that ferried them back to something called the HMS Endeavour. The humans' methods of war and technology baffled her. They engineered bizarre wormhole-based ATL drives. They turned gravity from a challenge into a joke. They hated slavery so fiercely that a whiff of English air made a slave free, an absurd concept, yet it worked in practice. And their tactics? They had confronted a hostile crew in broad daylight, employing trickery and humor as weapons. The humans seemed to consider cunning and guile as normal tools of warfare, whereas her people relied on honorable ambushes, careful single combats, and stealthy pounces. As Talasia recovered in a med bay on the Endeavor, she realized the humans didn't just free her. They aimed to free all slaves aboard the Xyrillian freighter. Indeed, after storming and securing the ship, they brought over dozens of other enslaved beings, Duerfine, Oroke, and even a few of her own Bagrath kin. The humans administered medical care, removed collars, offered food and clean quarters. Dickey explained that humans, once new to the galactic scene, found slavery abhorrent. Apparently, they had a historical precedent on Earth. "The air of England is too pure for a slave to breathe," he said proudly, quoting ancient terrestrial law. Now they intended to apply that principle throughout the galaxy. An impossible dream maybe, but their sincerity touched her deeply. Chapter 6. Echoes of Wars Past. In her dreams, Talasia saw reflections of what the old Stellaran father had told his son, though she never met these particular Stellaran characters. She dreamed of ancient battles, of Stellaran forces crushed by human millions. Perhaps the Stellaran father's words had spread quietly through whispers among other species. Perhaps that same truth had guided humans to develop strong moral stances against slavery and dominance. She couldn't know. But her subconscious mind, piecing together stories overheard at the cantina and the talk of Federation wars, hinted that the humans' ferocity and cunning didn't come from nowhere. It came from a history of needing to survive against overwhelming odds, just as they once did at Lee's world. This strange alliance between Talasia, a newly freed Bagrath, and these human liberators began to form. She recognized that humans were neither devils nor angels. They were complicated, driven by principle, cunning, and an odd sense of humor. Chapter 7. Adjusting to Freedom. Over the following days aboard the Endeavor, Talasia struggled with her new status. She was free, but what did that mean? She had spent her life in servitude, scrubbing decks and obeying commands. Now, humans offered her a chance to join their crew or choose her own path. They even joked about needing a good, googla, bowler for something called cricket, a nonsensical request, but it symbolized their willingness to integrate her fully, not just as a rescued victim, but as a potential comrade. Dickey introduced her to other rescued slaves. Some were terrified, others hopeful. The Endeavor's chief medical officer treated them with kindness. She learned that the humans planned to report the incident to their authorities, to spark diplomatic confrontations that would challenge the Federation's acceptance of slavery. While some species might resent human meddling, Talasia saw genuine righteousness in their cause. Late one evening, Dickey invited her to dine. She was nervous, uncertain how to act in a private dinner with a human commander who effortlessly switched from jovial friend to lethal warrior. Yet she accepted, driven by curiosity and gratitude. Chapter 8. Diplomatic Storms and Uncertain Futures. Before the dinner, alarms rang again. Human scouts detected a fleet of Xyrillian warships responding to the Endeavor's actions. Talasia braced for another violent engagement. To her astonishment, the humans didn't panic. They treated it as a mere inconvenience. "We've faced worse," Dickey said wryly, "and come out on top." She recalled the father's tale of how humans overwhelmed Stellaran warriors centuries ago. The humans' confidence now mirrored that ancient might. This was a species that turned out millions of soldiers on a whim. Even if this was a different era, their capacity for adaptation and cunning remained immense. As the Endeavor approached the confrontation, Talasia hovered near a console, watching humans plot maneuvers. They bragged about illegal gravity manipulation and creative FTL arrays, defying physics. For a moment, she doubted her sanity. Yet as they engaged, spinning the huge ship and unleashing multi-directional fire, the enemy flotilla soon faltered. The humans' unpredictable tactics sowed chaos. Xyrillian ships reeled under the barrage, and after a brutal exchange, they retreated. The Endeavor sustained minimal damage, and the humans cheered with relief. Afterwards, the human crews celebrated modestly. They had proven their point. They would not tolerate slavers. Diplomatic firestorms would come, but they were ready. As Talasia watched, understanding dawned. Humans fought dirty and clever, not out of dishonor, but out of necessity. Against enormous odds, cunning guaranteed survival. Chapter 9. The Dinner and the Aftermath. That evening, Talasia presented herself at Dickie's quarters, still unsure what to wear, settling on simple, comfortable attire provided by the quartermaster. She entered a cabin richly decorated with odd earth artifacts, old maps, a framed jersey from some cricket team, antique telescopes, and that same newspaper he carried in the cantina. The air smelled faintly of spices unfamiliar to her. Dickie, dressed in what he called his evening casual, greeted her warmly. He'd arranged a simple meal, some human dishes adapted to galactic tastes. Conversation flowed easily. He asked about her past, her people, her hopes. She inquired about humans, their bizarre laws, their wormhole engines, their old Earth traditions. Over plates of well-seasoned roots and a curious meat substitute dish, they forged a deeper understanding. Dickie explained Earth's history, how humans nearly destroyed themselves before uniting to explore the stars, how they overcame prejudices and developed a moral code that forbade slavery. He spoke of old naval traditions. The air of England is too pure for a slave to breathe, was once symbolic, but they had brought that principle into the galaxy. Talasia's eyes welled with tears. She realized that while the galaxy was wide and full of dangers, beings like Dickie and his crew could bring hope. They might not be perfect. They were somewhat mad, unpredictable, but they cared about justice and dignity. Perhaps that was enough. Chapter 10. A Future Chosen. In the days that followed, the Endeavor ferried the liberated slaves to a neutral station where humanitarian workers waited to help them start new lives. Some would return to their homeworlds if safe, others would remain under human protection until stable arrangements could be made. Talasia considered her own path. She had no home to go back to. Her clan, if alive, was scattered. The memory of her slave collar still choked her spirit. She feared loneliness without these strange human allies. Dickie sensed her indecision. "You know," he said quietly as they strolled through a corridor bathed in warm lighting, "we could use a cultural liaison aboard the Endeavor. Someone who understands the Federation's ways. You have a knack for languages, negotiation, and you're quick-witted. If you'd like to stay with us, we'd be honored." Her heart swelled. "You trust me to represent you?" "Why not?" he chuckled. "You've already seen us at our best and worst. You handled yourself in danger, and I can't think of anyone else who tried pure oxygen diplomacy on their first day of freedom." She laughed despite herself. "If that's a job requirement, I suppose I qualify." Thus, Talasia chose to remain with humans, forging a new role aboard the Endeavor. She learned more each day, about their history, their love of odd sports, their willingness to stand against injustice. And as the Endeavor set sail, if that was the right term in space, for new missions, perhaps even revisiting worlds like Lee's world, she found her doubts settling into cautious admiration. Epilogue. Wisdom carried across time. Somewhere, on the Stellarian homeworld, the father and his son still lived peacefully. The son, now older, pondered his father's truths about the human war. He questioned the council's propaganda quietly, seeking secret tomes and hidden archives. Bit by bit, he understood that humans, those terrifying beings who once outnumbered and outwitted Stellarian warriors, were not to be provoked lightly. He decided to channel his warrior training into defending his people from real threats, not illusions. He considered reaching out diplomatically to other species, perhaps even humans, though the Council forbade such notions. And in orbit around distant stars, the Endeavour sailed under the watchful command of Commander Richard Dickey for Tiska's smithy. With Talasia at his side, they navigated political quagmires, freed slaves, challenged injustice, and swapped jokes. They played cricket on zero-G decks and argued friendly about who would bowl the best googla. They learned that courage could take many forms, that cunning and compassion together reshape destinies. So these two tales, one separate, a stellar end father's painful confession to his child, and a Bagra slave's unexpected rescue by lunatic yet principled humans, became chapters in a larger galactic tapestry. The father's truth ensured a stellar end child grew cautious and wise. The human crew's actions ensured a Bagra found freedom and purpose. Together, these stories whispered that understanding and empathy could surpass ancient grudges and violent histories. In the quiet of a stellar end evening, father and son gazed at distant stars, knowing humans lurked out there with their impossible engines and fervent moral codes. On the Endeavour, Talasia and Dickey charted new courses, bridging gaps between species once locked in hatred and fear. The galaxy, vast and secretive, moved on, and within it pulsed a new current, a slow, persistent march toward honest dialogue, shared understanding, and the fragile, precious promise of peace.